So, um, since Pesach is coming, the Mishnah says in Psachim Daf Kuf Tezayin with Beis B'chol Dor V'Dor Chayev Odom Lirois Es Atzmoi Ki'ilu Hu Yotzo MiMitzrayim Shenemar V'Higadeto Levincho Bayoyim Ahu Leimor Ba'avur Zeh Oso Hashem Li B'Tzeisi MiMitzrayim. So in every generation, a person should consider it as he himself left Mitzrayim. And we're learning this from the pasuk. He did it to me. Etc. So this is what the Mishnah says. The Gemara brings Amarave Tzorich sheyoymar v'oisanu hoitzi misham. And so we have it in the Nusach HaAgoda that we bring this pasuk that Rava brought, v'oisanu hoitzi misham. The Rashbam says Tzorich sheyoymar pasuk zeh v'oisanu hoitzi misham mishum shetzorich laharos es atzmai ki'ilu yotza misham she'af oisanu go'al HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But be'emes, it's hard to understand what was Rav and Moisif on what it says in the Mishnah. I mean, the Mishnah says, and the Mishnah brings the pasuk where it says, "Ba'avur zeh asa Hashem li," and Rav says you need to say, "V'isanu hoitzi misham," a different pasuk. And what's better about this pasuk than the pasuk of asa Hashem li that the Mishnah brings? So it would be possible that the pasuk v'higadeto lebincho bayoyim ahu leimor ba'avur zeh asa Hashem li, which appears in Parshas Boy, is being said to the door of the Yotzei Mitzrayim, and so it's really true that v'higadeto lebincho bayoyim ahu leimor ba'avur zeh asa Hashem li is those that left Mitzrayim are going to be saying it. So how do we see from here that b'chol dor v'dor chayev adam liris es atzmai ki'ilu hu yotze mitzrayim? So it must be that, in spite of the fact that this pasuk is talking to the Yotzei Mitzrayim, but since it's a mitzvah that's noyeg l'doros, so we say that if the pasuk uses the language of Li, it's coming to teach us that always, even in the future generations, the telling of the story should be in the same fashion that it was originally told by the Dor Yotzei Mitzrayim, meaning that the one that's telling the story should be feeling as if he himself left Mitzrayim. So when the Mishnah is making this Yalfusa from the Dikduk of the Lishna Dikra, it's telling me that the person that's telling the story should feel that he himself left Mitzrayim, like that generation felt. But we could still have a suffix if this chiyuv is a chiyuv of choives halavavos, that the teller of the story should feel that the redemption of his forefathers is like his own, or that it becomes part of the sipur, that it's not enough that I say that my forefathers left Mitzrayim, but I need to say that I myself left Mitzrayim. In the Mishnah, it doesn't say that he needs to say Ba'avur zeh asa Hashem li. It just says that from this pasuk we learn that b'chol dor chayev adam lirois es atzmoi. So the mashmos advarim is that it's just a chayves alavavis, that he should feel as if he left Mitzrayim when he tells the story, but the content of the story that he tells doesn't necessarily have to be that I left Mitzrayim. And Rava is being mechadish v'tzorich sheyoymar v'oisanu hoitzi misham, that it's not enough that the teller of the story sees himself as if he left Mitzrayim, but he needs to say so. V'tzorich sheyoymar v'oisanu hoitzi misham, and that's why the Rashbam says on Rava, tzorich sheyoymar pasuk zeh v'oisanu hoitzi misham shetzorich laharos es atzmai ilu yotza. So in the Mishnah it just says lirois es atzmai, but Rava was mechadish that the chiyuv is laharos es atzmai, and that's why he says tzorich sheyoymar v'oisanu hoitzi misham. The Rambam in Hilchos Chametz Umatzah Perek Zayin Halacha Vav says b'chol dor v'dor chayev adam laharos es atzmai ki'ilu hu ba'atzmai yotza ato miMitzrayim. And in Halacha Zayin he says lefichach kishesoyed adam balaylo hazeh tzorich lechol v'lishtois v'hu meisav derech cherus. So, which means that I have to actually act out with the heseva. I'm acting out the laharois es atzmoi. Yeah. So in the Nusach HaGoda of the Rambam it says b'chol dor v'dor chayiv adam laharois es atzmoi. But in the Pirush HaMishnayos on the Mishnah he's goyres liros es atzmoi. So this would really seem to indicate that the pshat in the Mishnah is liros es atzmoi. The Mishnah only said that we learn from Bavur Zehoit Asa Hashem Li that the teller should feel as if he left Mitzrayim. But it's based on Rava that the Rambam says, B'chol dor v'dor chayiv adam laharois es atzmoi. But we still don't know, I mean, how do we see more in the Pasuk of Ha'isanu Ha'itzi Misham that Rava brings? How do we see more than we see in the Pasuk of Ba'avur Zeh Asa Hashem Li that the Mishnah brings? So why is Rava's Yalfusa teaching us Laharois es atzmoi, and the Mishnah's Yalfusa is only teaching me the Lirois es atzmoi? But the truth is that in the Pirush HaMishnayos Lo Rambam, he's not goyres in the Mishnah any pasuk at all. In other words, he just has in the Mishnah Chayiv Adam Lirois es atzmoi kilu yotzim Mitzrayim without a source, and it's only the Rava that brings the pasuk of the tzorich sheyoymar. The Rav is the one that says tzorich sheyoymar v'isanu hoitzi misham. So it could really be that it doesn't matter if it's this pasuk or that pasuk. Rav's main message is the tzorich sheyoymar. From the Mishnah, in the Mishnah it just says liris es atzmai, and Rav is telling us that that's not enough, but it needs to be v'tzorich sheyoymar v'isanu hoitzi misham. It could also be that really this pasuk V'isanu hoitzi misham appears in Parshas V'eschanu, and over there it's by the Ben Chacham. What the Mechilta says is the Ben Chacham. Over there it's talking about ki yisholcha bincha machar leimor, and Rashi brings from the Mechilta yesh machar shula achar zman. So really that pasuk is clearly speaking to the future generations. And Memela, we could learn from that pasuk v'tzorich sheyoymar v'isanu hoitzi misham, whereas the pasuk in Parshas Boy is talking about the Yotzei Mitzrayim themselves. V'hoyo ki yiviacho Hashem Elokecho al Eretz HaKnani. And Memela, from that pasuk, we can't learn that you need to say in future generations that I left Mitzrayim. It's just that we have a Yalfusa, since the Torah uses the Lashon of Li, that is a Chiyuv of Liris es atzmai. In any case, the Hemshech of the Mishnah, and so also in the Haggadah, it says, Lefichoch anachnu chayovim lahoidis lahalel. So it seems to be saying that the Chiyuv of Hoidah and Halel is based on the fact that it's as if we ourselves left Mitzrayim. The Mishnah says, "B'chol dor v'dor chayiv adam liris es atzmai, lefichoch anachnu chayovim lahoidis, l'misha asa laveseinu v'lonu es kol hanisim ha'ela," because it's happening to us. So, this needs to be understood. I mean, on a nes that happened la'avoseinu, there's no chiyuv of lahoidis lahal. I mean, on the nes Chanukah, on the nes Purim, there's a chiyuv of Hoidah and Halel. So why is the Haggadah saying, why is the Mishnah saying that it's only because b'chol dor v'dor chayiv adam lirois es atzmoi that we have the chiyuv lefichoch anachnu chayovim lahoidis lahal? So you know the Maharam Chalava says over here in Pesachim, when Rava says tzorich sheyoymar v'isanu hoitzi misham, the Maharam Chalava says kloimar the im loy hoitzion gam onu hayinu mishubadim achshav. Di loy, if it wouldn't be so, ein adam mevarech al neis shenasa la'avoisav elo ad ben benoi k'de issa beperik haroya. Ad kan l'shoynoi of the Maharam Chalava. So he's clearly learning that it's only because it's considered ki'ilu hu atzma yotza lefichach anachnu chayov lahoidis, because without that we wouldn't have a chiyuv Hoidah, because a chiyuv Hoidah nes shenasa la'avoisav only goes 3 generations, and it wouldn't go beyond. But the Maharam Chalava is very shver, because if you look in the Mishnah in Perik Haroya, in the end of Brachis, Daf Nun Daled Amud Aleph. The Mishnah says, "Haroye mokoim shenasu by nisim liyisrael, oime baruch she'asa nisim la'aviseinu b'mokoim hazeh." The Gemara asks, "Anisa de Rabim mevarchinon, Anisa de Yochid loy mevarchinon." V'ahu Gavre. The Gemara brings a story that shows that there's a chiyuv to make a bracha even on a nisa de yochid. And the Gemara is asking, why does the Mishnah say, Haroya mokim shenasa by nisim li Yisrael? On a nisa de yochid, there's also a chiyuv of making a bracha. So the Gemara answers, Amri, a nisa de rabim kula alma mechayvi levruche. On a nisa of the rabim, everyone is mechuyev to make a bracha. A nisa de yochid, only he. In the Hagoyis Agra, he brings that the Girsa of the Rif and the Gaonim is Anissa de Yochid, Ihu, Ubrei, Ubarbarei, Mechayv Levruchi. And that's obviously the Girsa that the Maram Chalava had, because where did he pick up this idea that it's only he and his son's son? It obviously comes from this Girsa of the Rif that Anissa de Yochid, the chiyuv is only on him and his son's son. Ihu brei ubar brei. But l'maisa, it's mefurish in the Gemara that this is all true about Anissa the Yochid. But Anissa the Rabbim kol alma mechayv levruchi. So how in the world is the Maharam Chalava saying that if it wasn't that the Nes of Yitzias Mitzrayim would happen to me, would be considered as if it's happening to me, I wouldn't have a chiyuv of lahoidis ulahalal, because the chiyuv of lahoidis ulahalal al neis shenase la'avoisov is only ihu breu bar berei, and it wouldn't continue for future generations. I mean, the nes of Yitzias Mitzrayim is a nisa de rabim, and a nisa de rabim is kol alma mechayv levruchi. The limitation of ihu breu bar berei is mefurish in the Gemara is only in a nisa de yochid. So in the Sforno, in the Kapitel Yud Beis, Pasuk Chavov, on the Moha Avoida Hazois Lochem, he explains the question of Moha Avoida Hazois Lochem. He says, Lama lo yaspik korban echad l'chol Yisrael k'may b'shar korban tzibur. Why isn't one korban Pesach as a korban tzibur enough? That's the question. Why does every individual have to bring a korban Pesach? And the answer is V'amartem zevach Pesach hu Hashem asher posach al botei b'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim b'nokpoyes Mitzrayim v'zboteinu hitzil v'yikoid ha'om v'yishtachavu. How does this answer why we need to bring an individual korban Pesach? Says the Sforno, Hutzrich kol echad lahakriv. Every individual is mechuyev to be makriv a korban Pesach ki anes Nase l'chol yochid b'fnei atzmoi v'loy latzibur b'chlal. Meaning that when Hashem was posach al haPesach, it was a psicha on every individual home, and therefore it's considered a nes that happened to every yochid, and therefore every yochid is mechuyev in the korban Pesach. No, now the Bala Agoda it says that this is these psukim are talking about the Ben Rosh. Which is the Ben Rosh's question. But the Bala Agoda brings the answer. He actually imports the answer that appears in the Torah by the She'eino Yoidei Alisha in the end of Parshas Boy. In other words, the pasuk of Ba'avur Zeh Asa Hashem Li B'Tzeisim Mitzrayim. And the Bala Agoda is mefarish Li V'Loi Loi. Ilu hoya sham lo hoya nigol, and so it is in the Mechilta on this pasuk. Yeah, it's bichlal a very challenging thing to understand how we brought the pasuk from there to here, and we put a new spin on it because avada to the Sheni de Elishal we don't say leave loy loy. So this spin is only after we imported the pasuk from there to here, and we say Ba'avur Zeh Hashem Li. The fact that we bring the pasuk from the Sheni of the Elishal to the Rasha, Rashi over there says on Ba'avur Zeh Hashem Li, Rashi says Kan Ramaz the tshuva to the Ben Rasha. In other words, even though it's not talking about the Ben Rasha, but why was the Torah Meramez the tshuva to the Ben Rasha by the Sheni de Elisha. I say that the She'ena, the Russia is also an Eina de Elisha because some people are too dumb to ask. Some people consider themselves too smart to ask. They know all the answers. And that's why it says, "V'hoya ki yoimru aleichem b'neichem ma avodas eis lachem." Yeah, is Rishonim Amadayik. That doesn't say that they're asking. It says that they're saying. Azoy state in that Kedas Yitzchak. So they're saying, in other words, it's a statement. He doesn't really want an answer. So he's also a kind of she'ena yoidea lishoil. He doesn't know how to ask questions. But in any case, the Bala Agoda says that this is the answer to the Ben Rosha, Ba'avur ze'os Hashem li v'loi loi. Now, according to this Farno, so we can say that when he's saying Ba'avur ze'os Hashem li, he's saying that this was a nace that happened to every individual, not to us, but to me. And therefore, if the Rasha would be there, he wouldn't be Nigal. Because if it would be a nest that happens for the Tzibur, the Rasha would also be included. But Ba'avur ze'os Hashem li is li v'loi loi. If you look at the Mechilta de Rashbi, on this pasuk, Ba'avur ze'os Hashem li, it says, Yochol, Achen itztarfo schus kulon. And Lulei Kain loy hoyu kedai bedover. You would think that it's only the schus of all of Klal Yisrael together. Talmud loyma Ba'avur ze'os Hashem li. Melamed shekol echad mi Yisrael hoya kedai sheyeosu nisim al yodoi. Right? So it's emphasizing that this was an individual nace. From the Mechilta, it seems that the schus of the tzibur really wouldn't help if the yochid wasn't rowing, and therefore we say to the Rashi, Ilu hayasham le'haya nigel. It's yitachen that the Gemara says in Nazir that only by Yisrael there's a shame kohol. Masha'en kain by goyim. The Rogatchover in a few places says that the Yidden are one Metzias, whereas goyim are individuals. So Lefiza, we could be done at the moment of Yitzias Mitzrayim, which is really considered the birth of the Jewish people, as you see in Yecheskel Perek Tezayim and in the Meforshim, that that Am Yisrael was born at Yitzias Mitzrayim. Ve'ever alayich, ve'erech mizbeisesev b'damayich, ve'or malach b'damayich chayi, b'damayich chayi. That's the birth of Klal Yisrael, like taking an uber mimei imoy, as Chazal say. So it could be that in terms of the Yitzia itself, it wasn't yet shaykh to be done them as a tzibur because Klal Yisrael didn't yet exist, and therefore they were being nidden as yechidim. It's Yadua, the Chidah brings it that tzibur is Rashi Tevis tzadikim beinanim urishoim. So once we're talking about a tzibur, Rishonim are included. But when we're talking about Yechidim, the Rishonim weren't included, and at that point we were nidoin as Yechidim. Be'emes it says in the Shlach Kodesh and others that Ilu Hoya Sham Lo Hoya Nigel is only talking about that Geula from Mitzrayim, but in the Geula Asida even the Rishonim will be Nigel. It's only Sham, they weren't Nigel. And this could also be understood in the same way, because over there was no Torah Tzibur yet, there was no Klal Yisrael yet. We were nidoin as individuals, and therefore it was Ba'avur ze'os Hashem li v'loi loi, ilu hoya sham loi hoya nigel. But it's only sham, whereas Lasid Lavoi, once we're a Klal Yisrael, the din is different. So this could be the pshat in the Maram Chalava, that the nisim of Yitzias Mitzrayim are actually considered a nisa de yochid, and not a nisa de rabim, and therefore we could apply over here the klal that only Ihu, Brei, Ubar, Berei, Mechayvi, Levruchi. And future generations would not have the Chiyuv Levruchi because it's a Nisa de Yochid. And it's only because Bechol Dor Vador Chayev Adam Lirais is Atzmoi Kilu Yotzim Mitzrayim. So therefore we're Mechayev Levruchi Lefichach Anachnu Chayovim Lahoidois Lahal. Okay, so this would all be good, but it's impossible to say this because if you look in the Sugya and Brachas, where the Gemara is being mechalik between a Neis de Rabim and a Neis de Yochid, we're talking over there about the bracha that Yisro made on the Hatzalah of Klal Yisrael from Mitzrayim. As Rabbi Yochanan brings the pasuk, Vayomer Yisro, Baruch Hashem, Asher Hitzil Eschem, Miyad Mitzrayim, Umiyad Paroi, Asher Hitzil Esa'om, Mitachas Yad Mitzrayim. It's from this pasuk that we learn the Chiyuv bracha al Hanes when you see a Mokim Shenasu B'nei Nisim LeYisrael. The Gemara asks, you make only a bracha on Issa the Rabbim. We see from other places that even on Issa the Yachid there's a bracha, and on that the Gemara answers that on Issa the Rabbim Kol Alma Mechayv L'Vruchi, and therefore Yisro made the bracha. On Issa the Yachid it's Ihu Brei Ubar Berei. So it's mafurish in the Gemara that the Nes of Yitzias Mitzrayim is considered a Nisa de Rabbim. So how can I say that the Nes of Yitzias Mitzrayim is a Nisa de Yochid? But I'm not saying it. The Maram Chalav is saying it because he says that there would be a limitation of Ihu Brei Ubar Brei. But l'chara, the Maram Chalav is Nistar from the Guf HaSugya, is the Chapliya Atzuma. So maybe we can say, if you look in the Maharsha, he asks on the Gemara, V'im Toimar, Ha'anissa de Rabbim Nami loy mevarchin el b'mkoim hanes. On Anissa de Rabbim, there's only a bracha b'mkoim hanes. Kediktoni or roya mokoim. Shenasu boy nisim liyisro. V'yisroi loy ba eileihem ela b'midbar Sinai. She'en kan nisim de Mitzrayim v'loy de kriyas Yamsuf. So he didn't see the mokim of the nes. So he says v'yashloimar de lechtom ba'midbar b'chlal nes hatzalosom miMitzrayim hu. So the Lefizah we can say that the Etzem Yitzias from Mitzrayim is considered a Nisa the Yochid because it was Pesach ala Pesach on every bias, as the Sforno says, and as we're saying that at that point they didn't yet have a Torah Tzibur, and therefore it was considered a Nisa the Yochid. The Gemara is talking about Yisro is making a bracha on Nisa the Rabbim. That's like the Maharsha is saying. He wasn't making a bracha on the Yitzia itself. He was making a bracha on the ongoing Nisim, that Nisei Hamon v'Habe'er v'Ananei HaKoved. And that was already a Nisa the Rabbim, because at the moment of Yitzias Mitzrayim, we became a Rabbim, we became a Tzibur. And Mamela, so we can be Meyashiv the Maram Chalav. If somebody has a better yishuv, I'm always willing to hear. Now, if you look in the Torah, in Arachaim Reish Simon Tov Ayin Gimel, he says, Ve'einoi mevorech she'osa nisim. Why don't we make a bracha, she'osa nisim laviseinu, bayom mohem bezman hazeh, like we make on Chanukah and on Purim? Zokte ve'einoi mevorech she'osa nisim, lefi she'osid la'omroi b'hagodah. So we see that he holds that the Nisim of Yitzias Mitzrayim are Mechayev, a bracha of Shasa Nisim, but it's included in the bracha of Asher Go'olonu that we say in the Haggadah. However, the Prish over there in Sifkot and Beis brings in the name of Rav Amram Goin that the bracha of Shasa Nisim is not applicable b'chlal over here, because he says Mishum the Yom Yeshuahu v'Adif Mines, because the night of Pesach is considered a Yom Yeshua, and it's more than a Nes, and therefore the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim Laviseinu is not shaykh over here. The Aruch HaShulchan says about this, V'lo yodati pirusha. I don't know what this means. But according to what we're saying, it could be that the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim was instituted for Nisim that happened then and there. But the Nisim of Yitzias Mitzrayim are considered Nisim that are happening here and now. As we say, Chayiv Adam Lirois Es Atzmai. And as the Rambam says, Ki'ilu Yotza Atomi Mitzrayim. And therefore, the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim La'avoseinu Bayamim Ahem is not shaykh over here. And that's what Rav Amram Goim L'chara means when he says that Kivin Dahavi Yom Yeshua. In other words, so you can't make this bracha because this in itself is the Yom Yeshua. The Rishonim at the end of Perek Avi Psachim have a discussion about the Hallel of Leilei Psachim, the Hallel that we say in the Haggadah, if you make a bracha or you don't make a bracha. The Ran says, Avol Rabbeinu Hai Goin Zal, Kosav B'tshuva she'ein mevorchim al Hallel shebeleilei Psachim ligmeres HaHallel. Lefisha einanu koirin oisei b'toras koirin. We're not saying the Hallel as a kriya, ela b'toras oimer shira. Shekach shoninu, Rabban Gamliel oimer v'chulei, u'b'seifer, lefichach anachnu chayovim lahoidois u'lahallel, v'chulei. Lefichach im ba adam levorech meshaskin oisei. And there's several Gaonim that say the same thing. So we see that Rav Hai Gaon was medaktek from the Lashon of Lefichoch Anachnu Chayovim, that it's not B'Toras Kriya that we're saying the Hallel, but B'Toras Oimer Shiro. How does he see in the Lefichoch Anachnu Chayovim that this is a chiyuv of, that this is B'Toras Shira and not B'Toras Kriya? L'chor the pshat is because the Lefichoch is going back on the Bechol Dor V'Dor Chayiv Adam Liris Atzmai. Ki'ilu hu Yotzam Mitzrayim Lefichoch Anachnu Chayovim L'Hoidos. And therefore, it's begeder Amiras Shira on the Nes itself, and not B'Toras Kriyas Shira in Prokim Yeduim. We have an Hallel that was instituted in certain days. Here we're talking about saying Shira on the actual Nes. The Rimi Gash in a Tshuva Simon Mem Zayin says, V'shesha'alto Lama ein mevarchin beleilei psachim ala Hallel. He says, Beleilei psachim lav mitzvah. Elo ke'ein simchas bailim hi, unesinas shevach lefnei hamokim, ve'ein mokim lebrocha. Which means that since this is a personal experience, so it's like, as the nes is happening, there's a chiyuv to say shira, but it's not the Hallel that was instituted b'yudches prokim b'shona. The Be'emes, it says in the Maharal says, V'Rav Hai Gaon Amar she'ein levorech al ha'hallel b'lei l'psachim she'einoi mitzvah, k'moi she'omar, lefichoch anachnu chayovim l'hoidos, she'pirushoi she'anachnu chayovim me'atzmeinu l'hallel, kivin shehu ke'ilu yotzonu ato miMitzrayim, u'k'moi she'heim koru es ha'hallel b'shvil hanes bulvad. So this is not a chiyuv of amiras kriyas hallel, but it's a din shira al hanes as it's happening. Now the Mishnah in Pesachim says, Ad heichonu oimer. How much of the Hallel do you say in the beginning of the Seder? Beis Shammai oimrim ad eim abonim smecha. You only say the first capital. Ubeis Hillel oimrim ad chalomish l'mayin oimoyim, and then you're choisim b'geula the brach of Ashigo Alonim. In the Tosefta, it says like this: Omru Beis Shammai leBeis Hillel. I mean, why do you say that you say also B'Tzeis Yisrael miMitzrayim ad chalomish l'maynu mayim before the bracha of Asher Go'alonu? V'chi kvar yotzu shemaskirin Yitzias Mitzrayim? Did they already leave Mitzrayim at this point that you're saying Yitzias Mitzrayim? Omru lohem Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel said back to them, Afilu hu mamtin ad kriyas hagever, harei elu lo yotzu ad sheish shoes b'yoyim. They only left during the day. Hey choymes hagula v'adayin lo nigalu. So therefore, you could say the B'Tzeis Yisrael before the bracha of Asher Go'alon. In the Yerushalmi, it says that Beis Hillel hold that you do say it because Hamaschol b'mitzvah Omrim lo meroik. Okay, so we already say the B'Tzeis Yisrael, which means that in principle the Beis Hillel amoided to the time of Beis Shammai that really at this point in the Seder it's premature to say the B'Tzeis Yisrael. Well, I mean, what do you mean, Adayin lo yotzu? I mean, Yitzias Mitzrayim took place many, many generations back. What is Beis Shammai B'chal saying, V'chi kvar yotzu? Teretz is that this Hallel is about our leaving Mitzrayim here and now. And therefore, only when we get to the point in the Haggadah where Yitzias Mitzrayim is already taking place, Beis Shammai holds it's appropriate to say B'Tzeis Yisrael miMitzrayim in the Hallel, and Beis Hillel holds Maschel b'Mitzvah Omrim lo meroik, even though in principle they agree that the B'Tzeis Yisrael should only be said after we reach the point of Yitzias Mitzrayim in the Seder HaHaggadah. You know that on the pasuk in Parshas Bolo, Keil Moitzion miMitzrayim, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says, Omar Moitzion. He's taking them out, not that he took them out. Hagam sheraboiseinu zichroinum levrocha amru in Brachas Daf Lamed Ches, the Apik Mashma. When the Gemara discusses Ha Moitzi Lechem in Haaretz, Moitzi Lechem in Haaretz, the Gemara says that Ha Moitzi, that both mean past tense. V'oichichu mikan, afal piken yoise mashma loshen ovar. Im hoya oime hoitziam. It would be clearly a past tense if it would say hoitziam. Why did the Torah use a loshen that could be present tense and not only past tense? V'nira al derech oim ramzal. B'chol dorech hayav adam liris es atzmoi kilu yotzam in Mitzrayim. Al kein amru yoidei pnimu yisat Torah. Ki kol leil Pesach. Mizbarerim koichois hakdusha me'aklipa. V'noisofim ba'am Yisrael. That Yitzias Mitzrayim wasn't just then and there. Yitzias Mitzrayim is an ongoing process. Every year on the Leil Yitzias Mitzrayim, there's an additional Yitzia. V'hi ha'bchina atzma shel Yitzias Mitzrayim, v'hu oimroi kel moitziyom. Ki lo Yitzia rishoyna belvad, ela b'chol shona v'shona moitziyom. So, in other words, the Lirai says atzmoi ki'ilu yotzam Mitzrayim. It's not just that we should imagine as if we were living in that time, but as the Rambam says, ki'ilu yotzam atam Mitzrayim, because then it be'emes reflects a reality that there's a Yitziyah Mitzrayim on a certain level that takes place every year. In the Shalos of Chuvah Sam Sofer in Arachaim Siman Nun Aleph, he writes that Hallel is the Chdafka Bayoim. Yeah, as it says in Seif Perek Hamad Megillah, we learn it from the pasuk of Mi Mizrach Shemesh Ad Mevoyoi Muhulo, and Ze Hayoim Osa Hashem Ayin Shom Elo Ditzorech Yishuv Halal Shalel Pesach. How do we say Halal on the night of Pesach? Halal is only by Yom. Ditzorech Loimar Dafka Halal Shekorim B'chol Yom Tiv. V'yoyim geula shetiknu loimat likishi goalu kedi isa b'psachim dafkuf yud zayin. B'hayam rinon mimizrach shemesh ad mevoyoy v'loy balaylo. Ki kach tiknu. Avo b'leil Pesach shehi shas haneis mamish al zeh nema hashir yeh lochem kelei liskadesh chag. So, what he's saying is, the Hallel of Leil Pesach is an Amiras Shira B'Shas Hanes. It's not a Kriyas Hallel that was instituted for Yomim Kvuin, and therefore it doesn't require a Yom. And as the Arachaim HaKadosh says, that this is the Shas Yitziyah. We say Lefichach Anachnu Chayovim L'Hoides L'Hallel, and we say V'noimar Lefonav Shira Chadosha Halaluka. So you know Tosfos and Pesachim Daf Kuf Tezayin Amid Aleph Amid Beis says Hachi Garsinan V'noimar Lefonav Shira Chadosha, which is Lashon Nekeva. Ubesoif Garsinan V'noida Lecha Shir Chodosh Al Gulaseinu Lashon Zocher. Why? The Hachi Tanya B'Mechilta Kol HaShiro is Lashon Nekeva Chutz Mishira De La'asid Lavoi De Lashon Zocher. And therefore the Noida Lecha Shir Chodosh, which is talking about La'asid Lavoi, is Lashon Zocher, Shir Chodosh. But all the shiras until then are Lashon Nekeva. Now, so when we say V'noima Lefonov Shira Chadosha, Lefizeh, we're talking about the Shira that we said B'Shas Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's why it's Shira Chadosha Lashon Nekeva. We're not talking about a Shira that we will say eventually. We're talking about the Shira that was said then, as we say in the Birchas HaGeula in Tefillah, Shira Chadosha Shibchu Geulim L'Shimcha Agadol Asvasaya. So if you look on the Gilyon in the Gemara, they bring that the Shlosh says that Lefizeh you're supposed to say V'ne'emar Lefonov Shira Chadosha. It was said before him a Shira Chadosha. It's not that we are going to say a Shira Chadosha, because what we're going to say is a Shir Chodesh, V'nei L'cha Shir Chodesh. And so brings the Magen Avram in Siman Tov Ayin Gimel B'Shem the Bach and the Marshal. But in most Haggadahs that we have, the Nusach is V'noimar with a Cholam, which is future tense. So how do we explain it? Why is it V'noimar Lefon of Shir Chadosha? But according to this, it could be that the Shir Chadosha is talking about the Shira of Yitzias Mitzrayim. But V'noimar Lefon of means that now we're going to say the Shira. We're not saying Hallel now as a Hallel that we say on Sukkot. V'noimar lefonov Shira Chadosha is we're going to say the Shira Chadosha that Shipku Geulim al Svas Hayom. We're going to say it now because Now we're experiencing Yitzias Mitzrayim, and we're going to say that Shiro Chadosho. In any case, on the night of the Seder, obviously it means that we have to bring ourselves to a point where we're roi to Geula on a personal level, because Yitzias Mitzrayim, as we saw in the Sforno and in the Maram Chalava, is really a personal nace. It's not a collective nace. In other words, the emphasis over here is that in spite of the fact that we eventually became a nation, we became a tzibur, but we need to remember that every individual is an olam mole, and it's an issa de yochid. Korban Pesach is taka osi b'knufya, but it's a korban yochid, not a korban tzibur, which is the im'ein anili mili, ukshani la'atzmi mani. You need the knufya. But you have to make yourself roi, which is the im'ein anili mili. You should be roi for the nisa the yachid, So and this is a special hadgasha that at the time that Klal Yisrael was becoming a nation, until here we were just a family, shivim nefesh. But now we're becoming a nation. We're becoming a nation. There's a special emphasis on Sela Beis Avois, Sela Bais, that every individual home, Pesach Hashem ala Pesach, every individual home has to be Roy for Geula. Every individual home has to do its avoida, and you can't rely on the collective tzibur. Sela Beis Avois, Sela Bais, and only afterwards, Im Yimat Abayis Meyois Miseh, V'lo Kachu, Ushcheinei HaKorv El Beisai. Yeah? Because a nation is built one family at a time. It's not like an abstract general idea, but it's Sela Beis Avos, Sela Bayis, V'Yimat Abayis Meyois Miseh, V'lo Kachu, Ushcheinei HaKorv El Beisai. And I say, Hu Ushcheinei HaKorv El Beisai, because, people sometimes, they have Avas Yisrael, but it's a very abstract thing. They love Jews that they never met or that they're never going to see. But the Shcheinei HaKorv El Beisai sometimes is a challenge. The next door neighbor, that gets on my nerves. So we say no. V'lo Ushcheinei HaKorv El Beisai, that the tzibur is built by one family at a time, and by building connections with the people around you, as the Gemara says, Aniyecha v'aniyircha, Aniyecha koidmin, Aniyircha v'aniyir acheres is Aniyircha koidmin. As they say, charity starts at home. So at home, and then around the home, and further and further around. That's the Hu Ushcheinei HaKorv El Beisai. Rabbi say so.